morning. My name is Susan Bishop. My pronouns are she and her. Today, because it's so cold out, I'm wearing two layers, green on top of yellow. Welcome to First Unitarian Church, where our mission is to explore the eternal, nurture community, and pursue the common good. We welcome you in your wholeness and in your brokenness, no matter who you have been, who you are, or who you are becoming. We greet you today with love. I'd like to extend a special welcome to everyone who may be watching us on YouTube this morning. Please introduce yourselves in the comments and let us know where you're joining us from. If you're in Oklahoma City, what neighborhood? If you're elsewhere, what city are you in? And now the prelude will prepare us for worship.
Good morning. My name is Tim Atkins, and I serve as your Director of Lifespan Religious Exploration. For those who are hard of hearing or watching us with poor bandwidth, I am both big and tall, wearing rainbow glasses and an orange and blue paisley print shirt today. We light our chalice in Midtown, Oklahoma City, a land that was home to first Americans, including the Apache, Caddo, and Wichita, a land that was taken from the Muskogee and Seminole and other removed and relocated peoples. We light the chalice as a symbol of our sacred time together. The burning chalice represents the light of reason and science, the warmth of loving community, the cleansing heat of justice, and the flame of hope.
Again, good morning. I'm Reverend Diana Davies. My pronouns are she, her. For those who are joining us who may have a visual impairment, I am a white woman in my 50s, and I'm wearing my clerical robe and my Side with Love stole today. Today, in addition to our chalice, we have lit 2 candles of remembrance. They're right down below me on the table there. The first candle is to honor Yom HaShoah, which in English is often translated as Holocaust Remembrance Day or Holocaust Memorial Day, but is more accurately a day of remembrance of both great catastrophe and great bravery. 80 years ago, On April 19th, 1943, in Warsaw, Poland, Nazi soldiers attempted to force Jews to leave the ghetto to be transported to death camps. But instead of complying, members of the Jewish community resisted. They fought. They fought literally to their deaths. Ultimately, the Nazis burned down the ghetto, killing at least 13,000 Jews. Since 1951, Jews in Israel and around the world have recognized the 27th day of the month of Nisan, 1 week after Passover, as Yom HaShoah, a day to remember the devastation of the Holocaust and the bravery of those who fought against it. This year, Yom HaShoah begins tomorrow evening and lasts until sunset on Tuesday. We also light a candle today to mourn and remember. So we light our candle to mourn and remember the 6 million Jews killed. And on this 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Uprising, we remember that the flame also represents the passion and the courage of those who fought for freedom. The second candle is lit in memory of those who died or had their lives forever changed by the horrific act of hatred that was the Murrah Building Bombing on April 19th, 1995. We mourn the tragic loss of 168 people, including children in a daycare center and 2 beloved members of First Unitarian Church, Mary Renty and Susan Farrell. We remember that terrible event, the human potential for evil that led to such unconscionable loss. But we also remember the heroism and the human potential for good that was on that display that day and in the days after. On this day and all days, we remember. We remember. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit for our opening hymn. It's in the gray hardbound hymnal, number 18, What Wondrous Love. And Becky Talent today will lead us in the hymn.
Wondrous love is this, oh my soul, oh my soul. What wondrous love is this, oh my soul. Wondrous love is this that brings my heart to bliss and takes away the pain of my soul, of my soul. Takes away the pain of my soul. When I was sinking down, sinking down, sinking down. When I was sinking down, sinking down. When I was sinking down beneath my sorrow's ground.
Our time for all ages today is the storybook A Whale of a Mistake by Yonah Habai. This story to me talks about the importance of forgiveness, but also the importance of learning how to forgive ourselves when we make a mistake. So our story begins, "Oh, you made a mistake." You worry. The more you worry, the more it grows until it weighs you down. And then it swallows you whole. People shake their heads. "What a big mistake," they say. You shout, "Leave me alone," but the mistake doesn't listen to you. No matter what you do, you still feel it with you. I can never escape it. This is my life now. You don't know where your mistake is going to take you, but you'll have to go along for the ride. And it's not an easy ride. You're terrified and unsure. But when you finally gather the courage to open your eyes, you are surrounded by stars, and they are perfect. Or are they? You notice that some of the stars are falling. Are they mistakes now, too? There's a whole universe of mistakes out there. Somehow, your mistake doesn't seem so big anymore. You start moving again, but now you're the one in control, even if you're not sure of your destination. And when you're feeling brave enough to move on, your mistake doesn't have to stop you anymore. You wave goodbye, and your mistakes wave back, fading wave after wave after wave. So I love that story because I think all of us have an easier time forgiving someone else than forgiving ourselves. And so this is a reminder that all those mistakes we're beating ourselves up over, they're fading off into the waves. So now's the time in our service where we sing our children, youth, and teachers off to their religious exploration classes, but we're starting a new tradition that as we leave, we're going to tell you what the kids are doing today. And so today in our kindergarten through 7th grade classes, we're going to be talking about the concept of forgiveness, hence the story today. And in our 8th grade and up coming of age class, we're going to be working with our mentors on our credo statements. And so children, youth, let's go ahead and process out. Please join me in singing Go Now in Peace.
Okay. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Nathan. I'm the Congregational Life Coordinator. I'm very tall, 6'3", so I'm leaning down. I don't have anything planned, so we're going to see if those improv classes have been paying off. Who here, for the first time, this will be your first spring auction, if you don't mind, just putting the tiniest hand out. Awesome. So every year in the spring, we do a spring auction. That's why it's a spring auction. And this goes to generating funds for our general church fund. So this year is going to be all online. We are doing like experiences. The McLaughlins have been very kind to let us have their home for a winner, and Angel Fire New Mexico, gift cards to the area, and then different classes, things. So it'll start all online this coming Wednesday, where you can bid, buy things, and then it'll go until Saturday. And then kind of as a hurrah, hopefully we made money, we will have an event called the BBB on May 12th. If you got your calendars, you want to put that in. And that will be beer, barbecue, and bingo. Who here enjoys playing bingo? All right, very awesome. So that will be kind of like another way just to raise a little bit more money and to say, yay, hopefully we made some money from our auction. I will be here this Wednesday and Thursday. If you have any issues with how to get on our website, all this info will be going out on the next week. If you need help setting up bidding, or if you want to just know how to beat that person who keeps winning that angel firehouse. All right, I think that's it. All right, thank you, everybody.
Hello, my name's Tom Perriam. I am a middle-aged man wearing a spectacular paisley shirt. Nathan didn't get the message that it was Paisley Shirt Day. Sorry, Nathan. I'm a member of the Committee on Ministry. Now that's one of the quieter committees. The function of the Committee on Ministry is to monitor on a regular and continuing basis the effectiveness of the church's ministries, acknowledging and praising areas of strength and assessing the reasons behind areas of perceived weakness or dissatisfaction. This is so that we as a congregation can grow to our full potential and fulfill our mission and maintain a level of self-introspection and that helps keep us healthy. If you have any questions about the role of the Committee on Ministry, or have any concerns, praise, or ideas about the ministry, so when I say ministries, I'm talking, could be we have a music ministry, that's the choir, we have a young adult education, we have children's RE that just left, that's a ministry, pastoral care, kind of anything the church does is a ministry. So anything about that, let us know. The Committee on Ministry names are in the second page on the opening of your order of service, and I welcome you to talk to us. Okay, every Sunday we take an offering, and since 2002, all the cash and designated checks from that offering have gone directly to external nonprofit organizations doing good work. We call these our Change for Change partners. For the month of April, our Change for Change partners, OKC Beautiful's Garden Support Program, also known as OKC Harvest. Their mission is to bring environmental science to life through a school garden. They involve students in the preparation of garden soil, planting, growing, and eating healthy foods. Funds collected from Change for Change will go to support school gardens at Cleveland Elementary, Wilson Elementary, and Bodine Elementary schools. For those of you who are in the sanctuary with us today, in just a moment we'll be passing the offering plate, and if you're watching us online, please make your gift by sending a check to First Unitarian. Just write Change for Change on the memo line, or make an online payment through our website, 1UC.org.
We now have a little story for you from Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, and it's a story about forgiveness. Now, a long time ago, maybe in the early 1900s, when there was still a large and vibrant Jewish population in Poland, there lived a man in a town called Brysk, the rabbi, and he was a beloved rabbi and very well known, renowned throughout the country for his wisdom and his scholarship. But to look at him, you wouldn't know he was a famous man. He was very small, he was very plainly dressed. You simply wouldn't notice him if you passed him by. So this rabbi was in Warsaw, and he was going to travel back to his hometown, and he bought a ticket on the train, and he got in his train compartment. And he was joined by a group of traveling salesmen. As soon as the train started to move, the salesman got out a deck of cards, started to play cards. A very lively game. And as the excitement grew with the game, there was something else noticeable about that compartment, and that's the rabbi, who was just sitting by himself, kind of staring off, deep in thought, deep in meditation. And at first this was a little disconcerting to the other men in the compartment playing their game. And then it got to be, well, annoying. And so one of the salesmen leaned over and said to the rabbi, "Hey, you, look, either play cards with us and join the fun, or leave the compartment." Well, the rabbi did neither. He was still lost in thought. And so a couple of minutes later, the same salesman took the rabbi, lifted him up by his coat collar, pushed him out of the compartment, closed the compartment door behind him, and the rabbi proceeded to have to stand up for several hours in the passageway of the train car until he got to his hometown. Now, when they got to Brysk, the salesman happened to get off as well. It was the first stop on his itinerary that week. And he looked over and he saw the man that was in the compartment with him. And there were a group of people around this guy. And they were all shaking his hand and asking him how his trip was. And somebody was picking up his luggage for him, and they were kind of moving down the platform. And the salesman turned to someone next to him and said, "Who is that guy?" And the person said, "You don't know the famous Rabbi of Brysk?" Well, it so happens he did know of the famous Rabbi of Brysk. He didn't know that's who that was, and his heart sank. And he ran down the platform, caught up with the rabbi, and asked him to forgive him for being rude. The rabbi declined to do so and kept walking. And later that afternoon, the salesman's in his hotel room. He's pacing back and forth. He's really upset. So he finds out where the rabbi lives. He goes to his house. He's admitted into the rabbi's study. And he says, "Look, Rabbi, I'm not a rich man, but I have 300 rubles saved up. I will give it all to you for use in charity if you will just forgive me." And the rabbi's answer was brief and quick, and it was no. So later on, or actually the following morning, the rabbi's son somehow hears about this situation. And he can't understand why his father is so obstinate about this. So he goes to see his father, goes into that same study, and he starts off with a general conversation with his father about Jewish law. And then the son kind of turns that conversation toward forgiveness. And at some point in that conversation, the principle of forgiveness, which is provided to anyone who would ask for it 3 times, is discussed. And at that point, the son brings up the situation with this salesman, who is still in town and still very upset. And the rabbi looks at his son and says, "I cannot forgive him. He did not know who I was. He did not insult the Rabbi of Brysk. He insulted and offended a common, ordinary man." So now let the salesman go find that man and ask him for forgiveness. So at this point, Rabbi Heschel reminds us that, at least in the Jewish tradition, no one can forgive crimes committed against other people. And turning to the Shoah, to the Holocaust, Rabbi Heschel says, it is therefore preposterous to assume that anybody alive can extend forgiveness for the suffering of any one of those 6 million people who perished. According to Jewish tradition, even God himself can only forgive sins committed against himself and not against man.
Thank you, Wendy. This is the section of our service where we do our prayer or meditation. But before we get to that, I just need to say, I need to share something with you because my heart is heavy today. There have been some things said on our private Facebook group in recent days, and frankly to me personally, that I need to address. Some of the things have been hurtful, I know, to members of our congregation, and so I can't let that just go by. I want to start by saying, I love you. I love each and every one of you. I love the new members. Oh my gosh, don't cry. I love the new members, the new visitors, the newcomers who bring so much enthusiasm and energy and diverse perspectives, and in many cases, the sounds of children. And that is a blessing. Thank you. I also love our longer-term members, those who've been with us for the duration. Those who are excited about changes in the congregation, and those who frankly are in mourning for the church that was, and those who feel both ways at the same time. Those who look around and are thrilled to see the new faces, but are also heartsick by the faces who aren't here with us anymore. I love you. I understand your grief, and I am so grateful for your continued presence. I love those of you who left for a while, tried someplace else, and came back. I'm glad you're back. And I love those of you who don't hear me right now, because you've left, because you missed that church that was. And given all of that, I just need to say, if I must make a choice, I will always stand on the side of the marginalized and the oppressed and the suffering. That is what our faith calls us to do. That's what this thing means. Side with love means love is more important than debate. Love for each other is more important than our personal political opinions. And I will stand by that to the end. I love you. I honor you. Thank you for being here. Once again, I want to draw, not that now I'm moving on to a happier subject, I want to draw your attention to the candles that are lit below me. On this day, again, we remember the 6 million Jews who were killed in the Holocaust, along with 5 million others, including disabled people, LGBT people, Romani people, and dissenters. On this day, we remember those individuals whose lives were cut short due to hatred-fueled violence right here in our own city. In honor of all these, would you join me in repeating the refrain to the prayer, "We Remember Them," by Sylvan Kamens and Rabbi Jack Reimer. At the rising sun and at its going down, we remember them. At the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. At the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. At the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. At the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of the autumn, we remember them. At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. Would you please join me in a moment of silence? Amen. Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh never publicly apologized. He never admitted any wrongdoing. Yet 2 hours before his execution in 2001, he asked for a Catholic priest to administer last rites. This sacrament for the dying typically involves a confession of sins and a demonstration of remorse. Of course, because of the seal of the confessional, we'll never know what happened during this rite, or if Timothy McVeigh ever actually uttered words of contrition. But what if he had? What if, after receiving the anointing and after confessing his sins to the priest, he had asked for forgiveness from the survivors and victims' family members who were gathered outside the death chamber? Even if they could forgive him, should they have forgiven him? In that situation, what would have been the right thing to do? Now, this question about the possibilities and limits of forgiveness is the focus of Simon Wiesenthal's classic book, The Sunflower. Wiesenthal, who died in 2005, is best known as a Nazi hunter. After the Holocaust, he dedicated his life to tracking down Nazi war criminals and bringing them to trial. The central story of The Sunflower, however, happens long before any of that, when Wiesenthal was a prisoner in a concentration camp. One day, Simon is called out of the camp to clear out rubbish in a military hospital in a nearby town. And on the way to town, Simon notices a military cemetery. On each grave, there is a sunflower. Wiesenthal writes, quote, "I stared spellbound. The flower heads seemed to absorb the sun's rays like mirrors and draw them down into the darkness of the ground as my gaze wandered from the sunflower to the grave. Butterflies fluttered from flower to flower, and suddenly I envied the dead soldiers. Each had a sunflower to connect him with the living world, and butterflies to visit his grave. For me, there would be no sunflower. I would be buried in a mass grave, and corpses would be piled on top of me. No sunflower would ever bring light into my darkness. No butterflies would dance above my dreadful tomb," unquote. Once they arrive at the hospital, a nurse approaches Simon and asks, "Are you a Jew?" Well, of course he is. She takes him to a German soldier who is dying of his wounds. His head is entirely bandaged except for openings for his mouth and nose and ears. And the dying soldier beckons to Simon to sit next to him. And he explains that he wants to talk about his experience, an experience that is torturing him, to get it off his chest so he can die in peace. Now, Simon has no idea who this man is, and yet when the German drops a letter he's been holding, Simon instinctively picks it up off the ground and gives it back to him. And the stranger thanks Simon, explaining that it is a letter from his mother. The man then goes on to introduce himself as Karl, and he explains that he is not just a conscripted soldier. He joined the SS as a volunteer. With that information, he reaches out and he grasps Simon's hand. And Simon considers pulling away, but he doesn't. Karl tells Simon about his childhood in Stuttgart, about his mother who brought him up to be a good Catholic, and about his father, a social democrat who was horrified when his son joined the Hitler Youth. At some point, when Karl is talking, Simon notices a fly buzzing around the soldier's injured head, and he swats it away for him. Once again, the soldier thanks him for his small kindness. And then Karl confesses to Simon about the terrible thing he's done that torments him. And I need to warn you, this is truly terrible. He talks about the time when German troops took over a Ukrainian town and rounded up all the Jews, mostly women, children, and old men. And they forced them, maybe as many as 200 people, into a building. And then they threw grenades through the windows, and they watched as the building burned. At one point, Karl saw a man with a young child in his arms try to escape by jumping through a window. And the soldiers shot and killed anyone who tried to escape. They shot the man and the child in his arms and the mother of the child who jumped out after them. Hundreds of people were viciously murdered that day, and yet it is that one child in the arms of his father who haunts Karl's conscience. Karl can't apologize to the family who died in that Ukrainian town. He can't apologize to any of the Jews he killed. So he's doing the best he can given the circumstances. He's asking for forgiveness from another Jew. Without your answer, he says to Simon, I cannot die in peace. So Simon stands up and he imagines for a moment that he sees a sunflower between Karl's folded hands. And without saying a word, Simon leaves the room. Years later, after the war, Simon tracks down Karl's mother in Stuttgart. He lies to her about how he met Karl. And he goes on to tell and she goes on to tell Simon about how her husband died in a bombing and how she is now completely alone. Lost in a train of thought, she acknowledges aloud, quote, what happened to us was a punishment from God. But then, in the next breath, she adds, in this district, we always lived with the Jews in a very peaceful fashion. We are not responsible for their fate. And doubling down, I can't really believe the stories that they tell. I can't believe what they say happened to the Jews. Now at this point, Karl knows that he could teach her a lesson and tell her the truth about her son, which might devastate her if she believed it. Instead, without saying a word, he leaves. Simon Wiesenthal ends his account with a question directed to his readers. and I direct it to you now. What would you have done? Roughly 20 years later, Wiesenthal asked the same pointed question to a group of scholars. One response came from Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, which is what Marshall read to us earlier. Heschel responds from the Jewish perspective that Simon did not have the right to forgive Carl for crimes he had committed against others. As a Buddhist, the Dalai Lama argues that Simon should have forgiven for his own well-being. Several Christians explain that their faith tradition implies that we should forgive even the worst offenses and not judge, lest we be judged. Although many are quick to admit that in Simon's situation, it would be difficult or impossible to rise to that standard. Finally, an atheist, Jean Amery, who was a resistance fighter and also survived multiple concentration camps, suggests that it just doesn't matter. That psychologically forgiving or not forgiving is nothing more than a question of temperament or feeling. And politically, Simon's forgiveness of one man makes no difference. Although the scholars from different faith traditions have different opinions about whether or not Simon should have forgiven Carl, all agree that the one thing he should never do is forget. Not one person argues that in the face of horrific wrongdoing, we should forgive and forget. Now, since ours is a faith that draws wisdom from many sources, I wonder what a Unitarian Universalist response might be to Wiesenthal's question, what would you have done? And after really thinking about it a lot, my conclusion is, I don't know. Or it depends. A contemporary Unitarian Universalist might not call for either forgiveness or retribution, but for restorative justice, which is a community and relationship-based approach where harms are acknowledged and work is done to repair the damage. Here's an example of what I mean. Some of you may remember this. In 2017, 2 Unitarian Universalists attending the General Assembly in New Orleans were assaulted and robbed. One was so severely injured that doctors initially thought he would die from his wounds. And yet, after the 4 assailants were arrested, the 2 victims wrote letters to the judge and district attorney asking for restorative justice instead of punishment. And about 30 Unitarian Universalists showed up at every court hearing asking for leniency. Yes, the young men had committed a serious crime, and yet, they argued, they were so much more than the worst thing they had ever done. They argued that sending them all to prison would neither help the victims nor give the offenders an opportunity to really understand the impact of their crime and how they might do better. Restorative justice, unlike our punitive justice system, offers hope for both the victim and the offender. It allows the offender an opportunity to express true remorse to those who have been injured, which at least allows for healing to begin. And yet, we can't compare what those 4 young men did in New Orleans to what Carl, the Nazi soldier, did in an occupied Ukrainian town, or for that matter, what Timothy McVeigh did in Oklahoma City. Now, thankfully, the question of whether it is right to forgive someone for unspeakable crimes isn't something most of us will need to face in an intimate or direct way in our lives. But Simon Wiesenthal's question about forgiveness doesn't only relate to Carl. It relates to Carl's mother. Remember that she had never personally harmed a Jewish person. Her crime was in denying that as a German she had any culpability at all, including by suggesting that perhaps stories about atrocities were exaggerated. And here I want to suggest that while most of us will never encounter anyone like Carl, we regularly interact with people like Carl's mother. Some of us might even have people like this in our own families. People who downplay the history of oppression in our own country or pass laws to make it illegal to tell those uncomfortable truths. Or people who proclaim their own innocence even as they vote for the politicians who pass those laws and spread hate and fear. There is no theological or philosophical consensus on the limits of forgiveness, except perhaps for the agreement that we must never forget. In the end, we might look not to the words of scholars, but to the actions of one man for guidance. What did Simon do when he was confronted with the challenge of forgiveness in the face of great wrong? First, he did not lose his basic humanity. He did not treat others inhumanely. He picked up that letter from Carl's mother when he dropped it. He let the dying man hold his hand. He sat by him and listened. He swatted a fly. Second, he stayed self-aware in the situation. He protected himself as best he could, but he also avoided acting out of a spirit of vengeance. He chose not to tell Carl's mother her son was not the good boy she thought he was, because he knew, on one hand, that he would only be doing so out of a sense of righteousness and a desire to inflict pain. And on the other hand, he realized that it was unlikely she would even believe him, which would likely make his own pain even worse. Third, in his public life, Simon devoted himself to bringing Nazi war criminals to justice and telling the story of the Shoah, not shying away from speaking the truth about what happened, so that the world would never forget, so that such evil would never happen again. And yet, in one-to-one private conversations with those who had done terrible wrong but were repentant, or with those whose crime was one of compliance and denial, Simon knew the power of silence. He understood intuitively that true repentance must begin with the self. Perhaps he remembered the words of the Torah, in which Moses listens for the voice of God in the whirlwind, but it is not in the whirlwind. He listens for the voice of God in the earthquake, but it is not in the earthquake. He listens for it in the fire, but it is not in the fire. The gentle whisper of God, the gentle whisper of conscience, only comes after this, in the silence. In the silence. Would you please rise in body or in spirit for our hymn number 108, My Life Goes On, an Endless Song.
We extinguish our chalice flame, but not the light of love and community that burns in our hearts.
I would like to remind you all that on April 19th, as is our tradition here, all are invited to join us here in the sanctuary at about 8:30, 8:45 for a silent vigil of remembrance of the Murrah Building Bombing and its victims. And now go and remember, go and be part of that force for good that makes a better way. May it be so. Amen.